Really do appreciate you joining us today here on America's Retirement Headquarters, home of the Retirement Guys Formula and America's Medicare Associates with Nolan Baker, Scott Kirshner, and Chaz Price. 419-794-3030 is the phone number, and the website arhq.com. A recent J.P. Morgan Chase study says 84% of retirees are making this mistake. They're following Uncle Sam's plan by waiting until 73 to take money out of their 401ks. And when they do, they only take the amount out that the IRS requires, those RMDs, required minimum distributions. Guys, what's the matter with this strategy?
Well, I think you got to step back and maybe take a look at it as a business owner. So, here you are with being in business, and you have a business owner that he wants a portion of your business, portion of your profits, portion of your money, and he gets to decide in the future what that fair share is. So, the thing about that is a business partner who's lazy, he doesn't add any value to what you're doing, in my opinion, but he wants, part of what you built your whole entire lifetime. In any business that I can think of, the thought process to be, how fast can I get rid of this business partner?
Sure.
So what I want you to do is I want you to look at the retirement like your business. This is one of your biggest assets that you own. And so the IRS is, making the determination of how much they can get from you. And in this case, it's determining at the age of 73 what your required minimum distribution is. And the biggest mistake with your IRA is not running a yearly tax roadmap and completing a checklist. So we had talked earlier about some of the rule changes that were coming out with the Secure Act 2.0 and how that might impact contributions for catch-up provisions of people over the age 50, forcing them to be in a Roth IRA. Where in reality, a Roth IRA might make a good solution for folks. Looking at things like last year, if you look at the shows that we had talked about, we had a big pullback in the market. And so while the market was down, we were screaming from the rooftops, it is a good time to look at what is called tactical Roth conversions, taking a portion of your money while your investment account is low, while the Bush tax cut and the Trump tax cuts haven't expired, and looking at converting some of that money over into, what could potentially be a tax-free Roth IRA. Doing things like the annual tax roadmap and kind of figuring out where does your income play and how much of an area do you have from a planning gap. Again, it doesn't mean that it always makes sense, but the mistake I would say with your IRA is not looking at it from a tax perspective and being in a situation where, again, according to the study, 84% of retirees are making the mistake, which is waiting until age 73 and only taking the required minimum distribution. Now, in addition to that, that mistake could compound if and when you leave money to your loved ones, being your non-spouse, your children, because that's usually when taxes are due. Again, if we look at the law changes, that's just another area where it's going to be a money grab from the government to try to get money, from your 401k before they're able to pass it on to your kids. They've changed the rules a couple different times. You used to be able to stretch it out over your lifetime, the taxes, and only take a minimum distribution, to now they've shortened it down to where you have to take those distributions over 10 years. So you've really got to watch out and not make that mistake of letting the government decide how much is your fair share. Figuring out what is the best way to make contributions and how should you be pulling out money and looking at conversions, I think is a big area to consider.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I use the analogy, this is not mine, but I love what Ed Slott says, is he says going from forever tax to never tax. And that's kind of the concept of the required minimum distribution, the vehicle that we've all used for retirement savings for the better part of the last, couple of decades here. It just essentially is where you're deferring taxes. You're kicking the can down the road, and you've got to pay tax at some point. You've got to face that deal with the devil that you've made. And so if you're not taking into consideration how much you're paying in taxes, I think that's where the real acumen lies. That's where there's been a renaissance or resurgence in tax planning, because we all recognize the issues that we're facing. The $1 trillion deficit, the continued budget spending, And that was even before COVID-19 and some of those spending initiatives. And so we're facing a real challenge. The government needs money, and so they're going to squarely, put their sights right on those required minimum distributions because it's where there's going to be a big source of tax revenue. And so one of the issues that I think we have with the required minimum distributions, going back to the prompt there, is it the right amount to take out on an annual basis? It does run the risk of, first of all, not having enough for your monthly needs. So you kind of have to determine what the best situation is for you income-wise. We do that through our financial planning modules and kind of coming up with a retirement income plan to see, how much should you be expecting to spend. But then the other thing is that when we're taking the required minimum distributions out, that's actually the government's game plan. They want you to do that because if you look back the history of taxes, they've been as high as 90% in the past. Mm-hmm. And so if we get into a situation where tax rates skyrocket like that, you're going to be faced to have to pay taxes. You're going to be required to do it at exactly the wrong time. So it's not necessarily the required minimum distribution, the amount that you're taking out. Yes, that's important. That depends on what your financial needs are. But if you have the choice, determining when taxes should be paid and when they shouldn't, if it were me, I'd rather pay tax when they're on sale. Get that business partner out of my finances. I use the analogy, it's like a joint account too with Uncle Sam. You have this joint account. He's not put in anything. He's just kind of leeching off the account. He gets money, and whenever you do good, he does good too. So it's a paradigm shift. We need to move more so from just looking at the incremental increases that we get from savings and investments, the 1 or 2% that we get every year if we're lucky over and above the market, and switch our thought process to how do we keep more of what we've made? Because if we lose 10% to poor tax planning, that wipes out 5 years worth of gains that you could have saved. So there's a lot that goes into the required minimum distributions. But I think that's definitely one of the main areas that retirees should focus on because it's going to be your biggest expense, taxes.
I want to throw a different twist here. I don't get something here. Why is there such a fear of waiting till the RMDs? I mean, I'm going to take money and live on that money during retirement, and spend the money I need. Now, I get it if I'm debt-free, I don't need to spend any of that money, I don't have any, outstanding bills that I need that money from. Why am I so worried about taking the RMD or taking money prior to RMDs? If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I pass on all of that balance, right?
Yeah, that's a
so
good
why don't
question.
you, like you said, both of you have just addressed this, taking that money, maybe, why couldn't you maybe take some of that money and reinvest it into some other mechanisms or tools or something like that, or, charitable contributions and things like that? But I don't know. That's just my spin on it. And
it's a good question. I mean, I think the one issue with the Secure Act that they eliminated the advantage was the stretch IRA. Nolan, you might have touched on that. But to me, if I'm thinking about future generations and I know I only need to take a minimum out, and I want to benefit my kids as long as possible and continue to stretch that required minimum distribution out. It all comes down to how long can I prolong paying the taxes.
Right.
That's the concept, that is the philosophy of America. We kick the can down the line. We wait. And it's not our fault. Our accountants have been trained that. We're just trained to do that. So that's a great strategy, 4 or 5 years ago when I could stretch the taxes out over multiple lifetimes. And since that provision has been eliminated, the vehicle, the IRA, it's really not as great of an option. And you're right, you shouldn't worry about not taking your money out as much anymore because you don't have the advantage of stretching it out over your kid's lifetime. So you're right. It's just maybe they don't know. And people are a little afraid of running out of money, I'm sure. We kind of talked about that last segment of when should you take out? Why aren't people spending more money early in retirement? Is because they're afraid of running out. So there's a little bit of that too.
I think there's two universal things. Everyone's retirement is going to be different, their hopes and dreams, right? But two things that are pretty universal. You don't want to outlive your money. You want to make sure that's there as long as you are. And you don't want to pay more than you need to in taxes. If you happen to disagree with that statement and you want to pay more, do nothing. Just let the tax changes come along the lines and pay the RMDs and only take that money out. Or I'll do you one better. Haven't mentioned this in a while. There's actually a place on the IRS's website where you can make an anonymous donation. You can just go ahead and give them as much money as you want to. An alternative, a better alternative, I think, go to arhq.com, schedule a time to speak with them, start developing a tax-savvy strategy. Buy Uncle Sam out of that business partnership that you guys have together. arhq.com or give a call, 419-794-3030.